Okay. First, real quick, anyone here named Michael? Mike? No? Okay. Figured I'd start with a mic check. Anyway, I'm here to talk about what is Enterprise MediaWiki, this conference that we're all here for, and what I wish I had known when I first joined WikiTeq back in January. So they are my current employer, and forgot to introduce myself. I'm Daniel. So a brief outline of what I'll be going over the next 20 minutes. First, I'll start with, am I standing in the right place? No. I'll start with what my introduction to MediaWiki was, how I first learned about this software and then got involved. Then I'll define some terms because we have to have a shared basis of what words mean before we can use them. Then I'll say, here's what Enterprise MediaWiki includes, because it's a lot. And then I'll conclude with some questions. Am I still staying in the right place?
Nope.
So my first impression of the MediaWiki software came around a decade ago in the aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombing, when my parents told me a story about a family friend who had been running that race. Thankfully, she was not in the blast radius, but she wasn't able to finish the race. Like, they stopped it. She came so close, like agonizingly close, half a mile from the end. So what did her friends do? They changed the definition of a marathon, because obviously Wikipedia is the source of truth. So this was the first lesson I learned from this story, that when they say anyone can edit, there's a very low threshold to start. You don't even have to create an account. This was done by an IP. The second lesson I learned came after this was reverted. Obviously, it's incorrect, as much as we wish the race were shorter. And reverted, and you know how edit wars work. And so the article was protected. Within the software, there is functionality to protect pages. I would have assumed, like, yes, not everyone can edit the main page, but this was when I realized, hey, it's part of the front-end functionality. It's more than just a static encyclopedia. It can be changed by people, and the permissions needed to edit pages can be changed. So there's much more than just the page and editing it. So what is entailed in Enterprise MediaWiki? Having gotten this introduction, I then went and looked at some terms. Have to have a shared basis. Enterprise. The Oxford English Dictionary says an enterprise is a commercial or industrial undertaking, a firm, a company, a business. Not the wikis I have on my computer, but the wikis that are on the web for companies. The Wikimedia Foundation, or WMF, is a nonprofit. They host Wikipedia. They do a lot of other stuff. They host Wikibooks, they do a lot. Fabricator is the bug tracker they use. If you see fab : something, that is a specific bug that I'm referencing in case you look at details. Is this software. It powers Wikipedia, it powers a lot of things. Core is the plain MediaWiki without all of the extensions and extra functionality. If you want to include one skin, I'd still consider that core, because you have to be able to view the pages. And given how easily MediaWiki and Wikimedia are confused, I figure that Mikiwedia and WikiMiki are probably reserved for some future use. Yes? No? I don't know. Is the foundation planning on rebranding itself again? So with these terms, what is Enterprise MediaWiki? What is the business use of this software? Hosting, it's development, it's maintenance, it's a help desk, and it's a lot more. It's asterisk, anything you want. It's anything that a client is willing to pay for, essentially, because we are providing software as a service, business. And this is not what my impression was of MediaWiki when I was just a talk page stalker looking through org or looking at some discussions on the Wikipedia. All Wikimedia deployed extensions and some extensions that are MediaWiki that aren't Wikimedia deployed on Garrett. And like looking through all this, there are considerations that the foundation has that Enterprise MediaWiki doesn't, performance necessary, and there are considerations that Enterprise MediaWiki has that the foundation doesn't, because it's supposed to provide knowledge and not make money. So at WikiTeq, we develop and target the long-term support branches of MediaWiki, which come out roughly every two years, which is a slower life cycle. The major versions are released every 6 months, in theory. Gets code updated every week with the train, usually on Thursday. So it's a new features aren't available immediately. If you request a feature and it gets implemented, we can give that to clients, unless it's backported, 2 years from now, less maybe. And there are documentation challenges. If I want to go see how a hook is used or what the extension schema is, code search will show me the current branch, the master branch or main branch, as we're master. MediaWiki.org will show documentation for how things currently should be used. And yes, you can look in the history, but every link will then take you to the current version of a page. And it's a lot harder, there's more challenges. It's harder to see what the state of the code. I'm trying to debug who's running 1.35 code. The clients themselves should be bug free. So there are some challenges staying on after changes have been made. And obviously, if you're staying on long-term support, you can update every 2 years. And there are some challenges with that. I spent a couple hours working on the semantic watchlist extension, which allows custom watchlist on semantic MediaWiki properties and concepts. And after having not been touched for essentially 2 years, there were a lot of things that needed to be fixed. And yes, PHP will tell you, oh, you can't call that, the function doesn't exist, or you're missing an argument, or that class doesn't exist. What it will not tell you, however, is if you're registering a hook handler for a hook that no longer exists. Because hook is if and when this hook is called, please run my code, rather than when this hook is called, please run my code. There's actually a task already created on Fabricator to validate whether or not extension hook registration corresponds to hooks that exist, because central auth, which is deployed on the Wikimedia servers and thus has active maintenance, was running for a while, or was listening for a while to a hook that didn't exist. It was just like by the wrong name, or maybe it had been renamed, maybe it had never existed, but it's a silent failure. It just doesn't happen, and there's no explanation why. We could try to shift this to a run this code when this hook is run, and validate every hook registration. And then for hooks that are conditional on extensions, you enforce that whether or not you check whether or not the extension that'll run that hook is installed before you register it. This is an idea. I don't know if it will ever happen. I certainly don't have the time to implement it, but that might help just create a message. Hey, the reason your user menu isn't updating with a link is because that hook that you were waiting for doesn't exist. If you're listening to the wrong hook, your code can be perfect, it'll just never run. Now, this is just like some clients that are on long-term support. But if you take a step back and look at the multiple clients that WikiTeq has, there's a lot of variety, especially when you compare that to what the Wikimedia Foundation has. If you go to the English Wikipedia or the German Wikipedia or the French Wikibooks or even MediaWiki Commons, they all have roughly the same structure. Yes, Commons has a lot of images, and yes, Wikidata is special in that it's organized around data instead of WikiText pages for the main namespace. But other than that, they look the same. We saw with the version compare that the extensions used are very similar. But when you get to the enterprise world and you have clients that want different things, there's much more variety. For example, the review requirements to get a extension deployed on the Wikimedia servers has to go through some review, including security. And I believe my colleague Brian was on the security team. Like, you have to check, hey, this isn't. The most recent security review that I saw was for the real me extension. It's just going to add the ability to say, hey, this is the real me on your user page, some kind of link specification. And that had to go through a whole review. On the other hand, there's the widget extension, which allows defining custom whenever that widget is transcluded, which, depending on what the widget editors do, can bypass essentially all of the security you do everywhere else. And that would probably never be deployed on the foundation servers. So there's a big variety. There's also performance requirements. Brian measuring that performance, and I'm looking forward to it. But with wikis where you have 100 edits in a week instead of how much does Wikidata get, 1 million in a week, there's a much bigger focus in the enterprise world on let's just get it to work. We don't need to support 1 million people if there aren't going to be that many. We just do what the client asks for, and if they need support for more performance because their wiki is growing, we can do that. But we don't do the huge optimizations that are needed on the foundation servers. There's also a huge variety in the actual extension themselves and their requirements. For example, BlueSpice has a whole series of extensions that all work together and are based on the BlueSpice Foundation extension. I haven't worked with any of those. Before I joined WikiTeq, I'd never worked on semantic MediaWiki because it's not deployed on the foundation servers. Come across it. We can now quantify, I discussed earlier today, using version compare, you can actually see, oh, here are how different these two sites are. They have 50 extensions each, but only 10 of them are in common. The other main way that sites can configure other skins. And Chameleon, that's not deployed on any foundation server. In fact, it's not even on Garrett. I had to go looking. It's somewhere on GitHub. But it's a very popular skin for our enterprise clients. And even if they're using a skin you're familiar with, custom site-wide CSS allows you to change virtually everything. So I'm going to show screenshots of, this is Wikipedia, which page that I'm used to. It sure has a, but you can see there's the main page, view source. This is what I was expecting. On the other hand, we have Wikizilla, which it says it's a wiki, but there are other softwares besides MediaWiki. So how do I know this is a MediaWiki site? Well, I poked around and it's our client, so it is. But anyone have a guess what skin this is? Okay, anyone else?
I was just going to say heavily modified monobook.
Yes, it is monobook, and there are a couple things. The way the tabs are shown, the lack of like the vector user links at the top, we gave that away. But I haven't used monobook much because where I spend the most time. So I had to go look in the HTML of the page. What is the class? And it's skin monobook. So this is just development. We have a lot of different clients. They have a lot of different demands. They have a lot of different goals. And you have to support all of these very different environments. But Enterprise Wiki is essentially anything the client wants, even if that's not software, even if it's asking questions. It's help with Wikimedia. It's help with MediaWiki. I'm going to make that mistake a lot. It's help with MediaWiki. It's the kind of things that on the Wikimedia servers would be covered at the English Wikipedia Tea House or MediaWiki.org documentation pages or discussion pages. And it wouldn't make it to Fabricator, the bug tracker, until you get to, here is the specific feature request that doesn't exist, or here's the extension we want. One client asked, how can I watch changes made to a category? If there's a category on the English Wikipedia, there's stubs that are short articles. I want to see every time an article is added to that or removed from that. Every time someone expands the article or every time someone writes a very new one. You can't do this very well with core MediaWiki. We came across, so I spent a couple hours researching this. I found that once you look at that category, you can go to the linked recent changes, and that'll show changes to pages that are now linked to the category, i.e. part of the category, or were linked, i.e. have been removed. But that's not part of the watch list. And if you're watching for category changes on your watch list, you'll see, is this page I'm watching added to a new category or removed from a category? Have a new removed. The category changes are based on which you're watching, not the categories you're watching. On the other hand, we found there's an extension on MediaWiki.org, Category Watch, which appeared to be exactly what we were looking for, watching changes to a category. So we replied to the client, here's the best you can do with core, and if you'd like us to install this extension, we can, because it looks like it would fit your needs. Another question we got is, this I still don't think you can do in core because it presents a security vulnerability. You're including HTML from some other site. So we went and we said, you can use the widgets extension. There are a couple others, but we recommended widgets, which allow you to define your own HTML similar to templates and then just embed that. We said, here's how you do it. And let's give you a tutorial so that you can add your own widgets in the future to embed other resources. You asked for just this one, but you want to be able to replicate that change yourself. So this is another aspect of Enterprise MediaWiki. It's not just the software, it's also helping with on-wiki changes and helping answer questions that wouldn't get to Fabricator or wouldn't get to Fabricator until much later. So what have I learned from this? Don't get me wrong, I love my job. I really enjoy my time at WikiTeq, but it's not exactly what I was expecting because I didn't understand the scope of all of Enterprise MediaWiki. I understood how the foundation uses it, but Enterprise includes hosting like the foundation, it includes development like the foundation, and development very much unlike the foundation. So essentially, Enterprise MediaWiki that's related to MediaWiki, if that makes sense. Any questions? Any on Hopin or YouTube?
They're on a little bit of a delay, but nothing yet.
When did you start using Wikipedia?
So I edit anonymously, so it's very hard to look at what was my first edit.
When did you start reading Wikipedia?
Oh, reading Wikipedia? Probably elementary school.
Which year?
I don't know.
Was it before 3rd grade?
I don't know.
Okay, if it was before 3rd grade, you would have seen monobook, but it used to be the default scale.
Until 2010.
Yeah.
Okay, I was 8 years old in 2010, so even if I was reading it, I likely won't have remembered that.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I can.
Yeah, it was from a while ago.
Yes, and I'm sure the different from the monobook today.
No, it does not.
We use
Really?
RCG icons now, and the optional mobile responsive view, right? Slightly different.
So it's been on KTL.
Okay, well, I didn't know that it hadn't changed because I didn't know what it used to look like.
No, you can't improve on perfection.
But that's why everyone here stated like, oh yeah, it's just monobook.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you seen anything in Enterprise MediaWiki that you think should be adopted in the Wikimedia Foundation usage?
So I've seen a couple extensions that we've developed privately that might be nice to be public and reused. I'm not going to go into much detail on those because they're currently private. But other than that, I don't. Not really. I've seen compared to, there was a bot and a script that I think Lads Group wrote that just says, okay, here are all the steps you need. And once you pick a shard, it'll make the patch for you. And it'll say, okay, now go to this message page to see if it's been deployed, because you need the localized name for the search results. And it'll say, okay, here is the initial creation patch. And here are the commands to run in the terminal. So they seem to have it figured out. They've been doing this, I think, a lot longer than WikiTeq, and Enterprise MediaWiki in general, I think, came after the MediaWiki software, I would assume. But the only thing I can think that might be helpful is some of the extensions we've written.
They couldn't hear the question. If you want to
Oh, sorry. The question was, is there anything I've seen in Enterprise MediaWiki that I think might be helpful or useful if the foundation and the Wikimedia Foundation also adopted or used on Wiki? Yes?
What are your thoughts on like Chameleon not being available on Wikimedia source control?
So the question was my thoughts on the Chameleon skin not being available in Wikimedia source control. And give me a second. So one of the things I don't like about Garrett is the fairly high entry bar to understand things that can't be done in the web interface, like rebasing a patch with a merge conflict. But that's the same in GitHub. So the difference between Chameleon is on GitHub, and if you can, anything that you can learn to do quickly in GitHub, I think you can learn quickly in Garrett, and vice versa. Anything that is hard to do, i.e. that requires knowing the terminal, is hard to do in both. So the advantage I would see to it being on GitHub is people that are familiar with GitHub, because before MediaWiki, I had never seen Garrett. I know the foundation uses it. I think Google uses it, but I just hadn't come across it. So I was more familiar with the GitHub interface. That being said, I don't know how well with like on running tests on Chameleon changes, and I'm almost positive that it is much harder, if not impossible, to run core tests against Chameleon to make sure Chameleon isn't broken on core changes. The foundation infrastructure is really interesting. That's where I learned about Docker. And like, side note, the fact that all of this is open source means I can just go and read PHP code that has been tested and ensured that works and has been running. And I can see, here's how you do ABC. There's PHP and Java, but there's also Docker files and Java, and I've seen Python code on Garrett, and PHP extensions are written in C. So I've seen some of the C code. And so it's just great that it's all open source. But the continuous integration setup can test like, hey, we're going to check out, we're going to make a copy of core with this change, and we're going to make a copy of vector and monobook and a couple other skins. And then we'll run all the tests for those skins in addition to core, make sure it hasn't broken anything. So that is the biggest disadvantage I would see for skins and extensions that aren't on Garrett. It's a lot harder to integrate that with existing continuous integration software. Was that anyone else? I guess not.